Most people think procrastination is a problem of discipline, motivation, or poor time management. They assume that if they just tried harder, planned better, or forced themselves to be more productive, the problem would eventually disappear. But if that were true, procrastination wouldn't be so universal. Smart people procrastinate, ambitious people procrastinate, even people who genuinely care about their goals procrastinate. So the real question isn't why don't we know what to do, but why don't we do what we already know? To understand that, we need to stop blaming ourselves and start looking at how the brain actually works. Think about a moment when you fully intended to work on something important. Maybe it was studying, exercising, writing, or starting a project you've been putting off for weeks. At the beginning of the day, everything felt clear. You knew what needed to be done, and you even felt a sense of motivation. But somehow, without making a conscious decision, you ended up doing something else instead. You checked your phone, opened another tab, or told yourself you'd start in just a few minutes. Hours passed, the task remained untouched, and by the end of the day, motivation had turned into frustration or guilt. What makes this experience so confusing is that it feels irrational. You wanted to make progress, so why did your own mind get in the way? The answer lies in a simple but uncomfortable truth. Your brain is not designed to help you reach long-term goals. It is designed to keep you comfortable and safe in the present moment. Inside your brain, there are different systems constantly competing for control. One of these systems is responsible for planning, reasoning, and imagining the future. This is the part of the brain that sets goals, makes promises to yourself, and believes that effort today will lead to a better life tomorrow. It's the voice that says, if I start now, I'll thank myself later. But there is another system that is far older and far more powerful. This system evolved long before modern goals, deadlines, or productivity ever existed. Its only job is to protect you from discomfort, uncertainty, and risk. From its perspective, the future is irrelevant. What matters is how you feel right now. When you sit down to do something challenging, your brain doesn't evaluate it logically, it evaluates it emotionally. If the task feels boring, overwhelming, uncertain, or tied to the possibility of failure, your brain interprets that discomfort as something to avoid. Not because you're weak, but because avoiding discomfort once helped our ancestors survive. This is why comfort is so seductive. Comfort signals safety, discomfort signals potential danger. Even when the danger is nothing more than mental effort or uncertainty, your brain reacts as if it needs to protect you. Now add dopamine to this equation, and the picture becomes even clearer. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure, but in reality, it's more accurate to think of dopamine as the chemical of anticipation. Your brain releases dopamine when it expects a reward, not necessarily when it receives one. This is why scrolling through social media, checking notifications, or watching short videos feels so compelling. Each action promises a small, immediate reward, even if the reward itself is shallow. Deep, meaningful work doesn't offer that same promise. The reward is delayed, abstract, and uncertain. Your brain can't clearly visualize how today's effort will pay off months or years later, so it discounts the value of the task entirely. From your brain's point of view, choosing distraction over progress isn't a failure. It's a rational decision based on immediate emotional feedback. Over time, this creates a powerful pattern. Your brain learns that effort leads to discomfort, while avoidance leads to relief. The relief might be temporary, but it's enough to reinforce the behavior. Eventually, procrastination becomes automatic. You don't consciously decide to avoid your goals. Your brain quietly redirects you toward what feels safer. This is why willpower alone rarely works. Willpower relies on logic and intention, but procrastination is driven by emotion. In moments of tension or discomfort, emotion almost always overrides logic. Trying to force yourself through willpower is like asking the rational part of your brain to overpower a system that controls fear, stress, and emotional regulation. Most of the time, it's an unfair fight. Here's the most important shift in perspective. Procrastination is not about avoiding work. It's about avoiding feelings. People don't procrastinate because tasks are hard. They procrastinate because tasks create uncomfortable emotions. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of wasting effort, Even boredom itself can be surprisingly difficult for the brain to tolerate. Procrastination becomes a way to regulate those emotions, even if it creates problems later. Once you understand this, self-criticism starts to lose its power. Calling yourself lazy or undisciplined doesn't solve anything because it ignores the real mechanism behind the behavior. In fact, shame often makes procrastination worse by adding another layer of emotional discomfort that your brain wants to escape. Real change begins when you stop trying to fight your brain and start working with it. Instead of asking how to become more motivated, a better question is how to make a task feel less threatening. Instead of focusing on finishing, focus on starting. Not because small steps are magical, but because they reduce emotional resistance. When a task feels manageable, your brain stops treating it like a danger. This is also why identity matters so much. If you repeatedly tell yourself that procrastination defines who you are, your brain will unconsciously protect that identity. But if you see procrastination as a learned response rather than a personal flaw, something changes. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're observing a system and learning how it operates. Understanding your brain doesn't instantly make procrastination disappear, but it removes the confusion and the shame. And without shame, improvement becomes possible. When you know that your brain chooses comfort by default, you can design your environment, your expectations, and your habits in ways that gently guide it toward progress instead of forcing it there. So the next time you catch yourself avoiding something important, pause before judging yourself. Ask what feeling you're avoiding, not what task you're avoiding. That question alone can change the way you relate to your mind. Because the goal isn't to overpower your brain. The goal is to understand it well enough that progress no longer feels like a threat. And once progress feels safe, comfort stops being the enemy.